That text message wasn't meant for me. My finger hovered over the screen, trembling slightly as I read it again. 3 years of marriage, and it took just 12 words to crack the foundation I thought we'd built on solid ground. Can't wait to feel you again tonight. She's at her book club. Miss you. I remember sitting there at our kitchen island, the one we'd picked out together, arguing playfully about granite versus marble, and feeling my world tilt sideways. The granite felt cold under my palms as I placed the phone down, screen darkened, like I could somehow make those words disappear. That Thursday wasn't even my book club night. I'd come home early from work with takeout Thai food, his favorite pad Thai with extra peanuts, because he'd mentioned being stressed about a deadline. The house was quiet when I arrived, our bedroom door slightly ajar. I heard the shower running and decided to surprise him. That's when I noticed his phone on the nightstand, lighting up with a notification. I'm not the snooping type. Never have been. My parents had a marriage built on exhausting suspicion that eventually burned itself out, and I swore I'd never live like that. But something about the preview of that message pulled me in like gravity. The name at the top read, Melissa from accounting. Melissa, from his office. The one he'd mentioned several times over dinner. Always in passing, always professional. The same Melissa who'd sent him a Christmas card last year with a handwritten note I'd found oddly personal. The Melissa whose name appeared in his search history when I borrowed his laptop last month to check my email. The search results showed her social media profiles. I stood in our bedroom holding his phone, hearing the water running, and felt my throat tighten. Time stretched like taffy. Should I confront him immediately? Wait for him to finish showering? Pretend I never saw it? In that moment, I made a choice that would change everything. I placed his phone exactly as I'd found it, grabbed my keys, and left the food on the counter with a note. Got called back to work. Eat without me. Love you. But I didn't go back to work. I drove to the park 3 blocks from our house, parked my car under a sprawling oak tree, and finally allowed myself to feel everything. The betrayal cut deep. Not just the affair, but the casual way he'd navigated his double life. How many nights had he touched me with hands that had just texted her? How many times had I mentioned my book club, unknowingly giving him the perfect alibi? I sat there until sunset, watching families pack up picnics, teenagers throwing frisbees, couples walking hand in hand, all these normal moments happening while my life splintered. My phone buzzed with a text from him. Thanks for dinner. Working late tonight on the Henderson project. Don't wait up. The Henderson project had been completed 2 weeks ago. I knew because he'd celebrated with the team at a bar downtown. I'd picked him up because he'd had too many whiskeys. Or so he'd claimed. That night, I returned home after midnight. He was asleep, or pretending to be. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching the rise and fall of his chest, studying the face I thought I knew better than my own. In sleep, he looked exactly like the man I'd married. Kind, dependable, mine. But he wasn't mine anymore. Maybe he never had been. I didn't cry that night. Instead, I sat in our living room until dawn, scrolling through photos on my phone. Our wedding day, vacations, silly selfies at restaurants, looking for clues I might have missed. When had the man in these photos decided I wasn't enough? The next morning, I performed the role of unsuspecting wife perfectly. I made coffee, kissed him goodbye, asked about his day ahead. Each ordinary action felt like walking on broken glass, but my face betrayed nothing. As he headed out the door, he mentioned his mother's upcoming birthday barbecue that weekend. Mom specifically asked if you could make your famous guacamole, he said, squeezing my shoulder. Everyone loves it. His mother, my mother-in-law, Dorothy. The woman who'd welcomed me into her family with open arms but never quite let me forget, I wasn't exactly what she'd envisioned for her precious son. The woman who still displayed photos of his high school girlfriend on her mantle alongside our wedding picture. The woman who'd once accidentally introduced me as his current wife at a family gathering. That's when the idea first formed. Just a whisper, really. A dangerous thought that should have shocked me, but instead felt like the first deep breath after nearly drowning. Of course, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I wouldn't miss it for the world. As his car pulled away, I made another decision. I wasn't going to confront him yet. I wasn't going to scream or throw his clothes onto the lawn or key his car like some cliché in a bad movie. No, this betrayal deserved something more. Memorable. Something that would match the cold, calculated nature of his deception. I picked up my phone and opened my laptop. First, I needed information. And I knew exactly where to start. Finding Melissa wasn't difficult. 4 years of marriage had made me complacent, but not stupid. I knew his email password, his cloud storage login, even had his location sharing turned on, ostensibly so I could see when he was heading home from work. These digital breadcrumbs painted a picture that turned my stomach with each new discovery. Their affair hadn't started recently. Based on the email exchanges I found, carefully hidden in a folder labeled Budget Reports 2023, they'd been seeing each other for at least 8 months. 8 months of lies. 8 months of me washing the sheets they'd probably stained together. 8 months of him coming home late with excuses about client meetings and deadline pressures. I found a reservation confirmation for a weekend getaway to a vineyard 3 hours away. During the same weekend, he'd told me he was at a marketing conference in Chicago. I discovered credit card charges for jewelry I'd never received, and dinner dates at restaurants I'd mentioned wanting to try. Restaurants he'd claimed were overrated, or too expensive. The worst part wasn't the affair itself. It was the realization that I'd been living in a carefully constructed fiction. Every time I'd voiced a suspicion, however mild, he'd made me feel irrational, paranoid, untrustworthy. "You know I'd never do that to you," he'd say, looking wounded. "Don't you trust me at all?" Classic gaslighting. I'd apologized for doubting him. I'd worked harder to be the perfect wife, more understanding of his late nights, more appreciative of his dedication to his career, less needy of his time and attention. 4 days after discovering the text, I finally found her Instagram profile. Melissa Harper, 32, blonde, beautiful in that effortless way that makes other women simultaneously envious and insecure. Her feed was carefully curated: fitness photos, elegant dinners, art galleries, and exotic beaches. No trace of my husband, of course. They were too careful for that. But there was one photo that stopped my scrolling cold. A close-up of a woman's hand holding a cocktail, a delicate gold bracelet visible on her wrist. The caption read, "Best surprise from someone special. He always knows exactly what I need." I recognized that bracelet. It was identical to one I'd admired in a jewelry store window during our anniversary trip last year. When I'd pointed it out, my husband had nodded absently, commenting that it looked nice but overpriced. 2 weeks later, a charge from that same jewelry store appeared on our credit card statement. When I'd asked about it, he'd explained he'd bought his mother a birthday gift. His mother's birthday was 6 months away. That night, as my husband slept beside me, I lay awake piecing together a timeline of betrayal. The business trips that ran long, the sudden gym membership he'd been so devoted to, the new cologne he'd started wearing, just trying something different. The password on his laptop that hadn't worked when I'd tried to print something for work, forcing him to quickly type it in himself. The way he'd started taking his phone into the bathroom during showers. All these things I'd noticed but dismissed, choosing to believe the man I loved wouldn't hurt me this way. I'd trusted him completely, defended him fiercely to friends who'd raised gentle concerns about his increasingly frequent absences. "He's building his career," I'd explained. "We're investing in our future." What future? The one where he eventually left me for Melissa? Or the one where I remained blissfully ignorant while he maintained his double life indefinitely? The pain was physical, a constant ache beneath my ribs that made it difficult to breathe normally. I lost 5 pounds that week, simply because food tasted like ash. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford as I spent nights combing through digital evidence of his betrayal. At work, I moved through my days on autopilot, nodding at appropriate moments during meetings, smiling mechanically at colleagues' jokes. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, his favorite lasagna, ironically, my sister called. We'd always been close, speaking several times a week, but I'd been avoiding her calls since discovering the affair. She knew me too well. She'd hear the fracture in my voice immediately. "Hey, stranger," she said when I finally answered. "You alive over there?" "Just busy," I replied, trying to sound normal. "Work's been crazy." A pause. "Are you okay?" You sound off. I nearly told her everything then. The text, Melissa, the months of lies. The words rose in my throat like bile, but something stopped me. Saying it aloud would make it real in a way I wasn't ready to face. More importantly, my sister would insist I confront him immediately, demand answers, file for divorce. The conventional approach. I'm fine, I lied. Just fighting a cold. After hanging up, I stirred the sauce mechanically, watching the wooden spoon create swirls of red against the stainless steel pot. That's when another text arrived from him. Stuck at work again. Don't wait up. I placed my phone screen down on the counter and continued stirring, my mind suddenly, eerily calm. I'd given this man everything. My trust, my love, my unwavering support through career changes and family crises. I'd stood by him when his father died 2 years ago, coordinating the funeral arrangements while he processed his grief. I'd worked extra hours to support us when he wanted to take 3 months off to find his passion last year. I'd postponed having children because he wasn't ready yet. I had built my life around him, and in return, he'd betrayed me in the most intimate way possible, not just with the affair, but with the elaborate architecture of lies he'd constructed to support it. Every reassurance, every "I love you," every promise for our future, all of it contaminated now. I gave everything to them, and they discarded me like nothing. The thought wasn't just about my husband, but about his family too. The family that had embraced me superficially while always making me feel slightly inadequate. His mother, who critiqued my cooking under the guise of helpful suggestions. His sister, who still referred to me as his new girl after 4 years of marriage. His father, before he passed, who'd once drunkenly mentioned that my husband had married down career-wise. As I dumped the untouched lasagna into the trash that night, I made a decision. I wouldn't just confront my husband or simply leave him. No, this betrayal, this complete dismantling of my reality, deserved something more, comprehensive. Something that would make sure he couldn't rewrite our history or paint me as the villain in his next relationship. Something unforgettable. The barbecue at my mother-in-law's house was exactly 10 days away. Dorothy's 65th birthday celebration, a milestone event she'd been planning for months. The entire extended family would be there, plus close friends and neighbors. My husband had mentioned it would be the social event of the season in their family circle, rolling his eyes but secretly pleased by his mother's flair for gatherings. I needed to work quickly but carefully. No room for emotional outbursts or hasty decisions. This required precision. First, I needed concrete evidence beyond text messages and email threads. So I did something I never thought I was capable of. I hired a private investigator. Not some sketchy character from a film noir, but a middle-aged woman with 20 years of experience and impeccable online reviews. We met at a coffee shop 30 miles from my neighborhood. I don't need dramatic confrontations or embarrassing photos, I explained. I just need verification, documentation, and information. She nodded, understanding exactly what I needed without me spelling it out. Timeline, locations, frequency, and identity confirmation. I can have preliminary information within 48 hours. She was as good as her word. 2 days later, I had photos of my husband and Melissa entering a boutique hotel downtown, time-stamped during hours he was supposedly at client meetings. I had recordings of their conversations in public spaces, nothing explicit, but intimate enough to remove any doubt about the nature of their relationship. Most valuably, I had Melissa's personal information, home address, phone number, and workplace details. But the most surprising discovery wasn't about their affair at all. It was about my husband's finances. You might want to look into your joint accounts, the investigator mentioned casually during our second meeting. Something seemed off when I was tracking his movements. That night, while he slept, I did a deep dive into our financial situation. What I found made the affair seem almost secondary. He'd been systematically diverting money from our joint savings account, the one we'd established for our future home down payment, into a separate account I knew nothing about. Small amounts at first, then increasingly larger sums over the past year. Nearly $30,000 missing. I also discovered he'd taken out a personal loan 3 months ago without discussing it with me. despite the fact that such financial decisions were supposed to be made jointly according to our prenuptial agreement. Yes, we had a prenup. His mother had insisted, citing his family wealth, that needed protection. The irony wasn't lost on me now. With trembling hands, I documented everything, making copies of statements and transferring them to a secure cloud account only I could access. Then I called my college roommate, now a successful divorce attorney in another state. "Don't confront him yet," she advised after I shared the financial discoveries. "Document everything. Forward all evidence to a secure email he can't access. And maybe consider moving some money yourself, just enough to ensure you're protected when this blows up." The next day, I opened my own separate account and transferred a reasonable amount from our joint checking. Not enough to alert him, but sufficient to give me a cushion. I also contacted a local attorney specializing in divorce cases, scheduling a consultation for later that week. But the most important call I made was to my mother-in-law. "Dorothy," I said warmly when she answered, "I'm so excited about your birthday barbecue. I was wondering if I could bring someone special. A friend from my husband's office who's been going through a tough time. I think being surrounded by family might cheer her up." "Oh," Dorothy sounded surprised but pleased by my apparent thoughtfulness. "Of course, dear. The more the merrier. What's her name?" "Melissa," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Melissa Harper. She works with my husband in accounting." "That's so kind of you to include her," Dorothy gushed. "I always say you can tell a person's character by how they treat others in need." If only she knew. The final piece fell into place when I accidentally mentioned to my husband that I'd invited Melissa to the barbecue. We were having breakfast. He was scrolling through his phone, probably texting her, while I buttered toast with carefully controlled movements. "By the way," I said casually, "I hope you don't mind, but I invited your colleague Melissa to your mom's barbecue this weekend." His coffee mug froze midway to his lips. "You... what?" "Melissa from accounting," I clarified, watching his face pale slightly. "We ran into each other at that cafe near your office yesterday. She mentioned she was new to town and didn't know many people, so I thought your mom's party would be perfect. You know how welcoming Dorothy is." He stammered. "I don't think that's a good idea. Mom's pretty specific about her guest list." "Already cleared it with her," I replied, taking a bite of toast. "She was thrilled at the idea of meeting one of your colleagues, said it was about time she met the people you spend so much time with." The panic in his eyes was almost satisfying enough on its own. Almost. "You should have discussed this with me first," he said, voice strained. I tilted my head, the picture of innocence. "Why? Is there a problem with Melissa?" He recovered quickly, years of lying serving him well. "No, of course not. It's just, office politics can be complicated." "Well, it's all set," I said with finality. I even offered to pick her up since it's on our way. She seemed so grateful for the invitation. The rest of that week was a masterclass in deception, one I'd learned from the best. I maintained a perfect facade of normalcy, making dinner, discussing weekend plans, even initiating sex one night, which he claimed to be too tired for. Meanwhile, I was methodically laying groundwork. I found Melissa's professional email through my husband's work directory and sent her a warm message, explaining that I'd spoken with my husband about including her in our family event. "He thinks you'd really enjoy meeting everyone," I wrote. "He speaks so highly of your work ethic and contributions to the team." She responded within hours, clearly thrilled at the legitimization of her presence in his life, however manufactured. "That's so kind of you both. I'd love to come. Are you sure his mother won't mind an extra guest?" "Dorothy's excited to meet you," I assured her. "She loves including my husband's colleagues in family functions." Then I called my mother-in-law again, cementing the plan. "Melissa's so looking forward to meeting everyone," I told her. "She's heard so much about the family from my husband." Dorothy, always eager to expand her social circle, was delighted. "I'll make sure to introduce her to everyone. Does she have any dietary restrictions for the barbecue?" "None that I'm aware of," I replied, "but I'll check with my husband." They work closely together. Every night that week, as my husband slept beside me, this stranger I'd pledged my life to, I refined my approach. This wasn't about creating a scene or public humiliation. This was about justice, cold, calculated, and complete. The kind that couldn't be explained away or minimized. The kind he'd never forget. The night before the barbecue, I packed a small overnight bag and hid it in my car trunk while he was showering. I'd prepared for every contingency, every possible reaction. I'd armed myself with knowledge, evidence, and most importantly, the element of surprise. "Looking forward to tomorrow?" he asked as we got into bed, his voice carefully neutral. "More than you can imagine," I replied truthfully. "I think it's going to be an unforgettable day for everyone." He had no idea how right I was. Dorothy's backyard had been transformed for her birthday celebration. White tents, fairy lights strung between trees, flowers everywhere. Classic Dorothy, who never missed an opportunity for tasteful extravagance. By 3 o'clock, the space was filled with family members, neighbors, and friends from her country club. My husband had been anxious all morning, checking his phone constantly, making excuses to step away for work calls. I'd watched him send frantic texts, presumably to Melissa, likely trying to convince her not to come. But I'd anticipated this, setting up a contingency I hadn't shared with him. I'd arranged to pick Melissa up personally. I thought we'd give her a ride. I'd announced that morning while applying mascara carefully in the bathroom mirror. "Since she's on our way, I don't think," he'd started. "It's already arranged." I'd cut him off. "She's expecting us at 2:30. The look of pure panic on his face almost made me laugh. Almost. When we pulled up to her apartment building, a sleek downtown complex with a doorman, my husband remained in the car, claiming a sudden migraine. "Perfect. I'll just run up and get her," I said sweetly, patting his arm. "Take some aspirin. There's some in my purse." Melissa answered her door looking stunning. Summer dress, perfect makeup, nervous smile. She'd clearly dressed to impress his family, unaware she was walking into a carefully orchestrated reckoning. "So nice to finally meet you in person," I said, extending my hand. "My husband's mentioned you so many times." Her smile faltered slightly. "He has?" "Of course," I replied warmly. "Shall we go?" "He's waiting in the car." The elevator ride down was filled with her cheerful chatter about how excited she was to meet everyone, especially his mother, who sounds incredible from all he's told me. I nodded encouragingly, watching her dig her grave deeper with every word. The moment she slid into the back seat of our car was priceless. Her bright, "Hey you," followed by stunned silence when she saw his ashen face. His eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, pleading, terrified. "Migraine," I explained to her. "He gets them when he's stressed, but he wouldn't miss his mother's birthday for anything, would you, honey?" The 20-minute drive to Dorothy's house was excruciating for them, delicious for me. I maintained a steady stream of conversation. Office politics, the family members she'd meet, inside jokes from our marriage. Each topic was a carefully placed landmine. When I casually mentioned the vacation we were planning for our anniversary, Melissa went completely silent. "Did he tell you about our plans to renew our vows in Bali?" I asked her. "It was his idea. So romantic." My husband's knuckles turned white on his knees. He hadn't spoken a word since she'd entered the car. When we arrived at Dorothy's house, I took Melissa's arm like we were old friends. "Let me introduce you to everyone," I said, leading her toward the crowded backyard. My husband trailed behind us, a condemned man walking to execution. Dorothy rushed over immediately, martini in hand. "You must be Melissa," she exclaimed. "We're so glad you could join us. Any friend of my son's is family to me." "Mother," my husband interrupted desperately, "I need to speak with you privately for a moment." "Nonsense," Dorothy waved him off. "I want to get to know Melissa. Come, dear, let me introduce you to everyone." As Dorothy paraded Melissa around, introducing her as my son's colleague, I watched my husband becoming increasingly frantic, downing 2 scotches in quick succession. Several times he tried to pull Melissa aside, but I remained close, inserting myself into every conversation, maintaining my role as gracious wife. The turning point came during dinner. Dorothy had arranged elaborate seating with name cards, and I'd called her that morning to ensure Melissa was seated directly across from my husband and me, with Dorothy at her right. Perfect positioning for what would come next. As the main course was served, Dorothy clinked her glass for attention. Before we eat, I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate with me today. Family means everything to me, and I'm so blessed to have you all in my life. She turned to my husband, especially my wonderful son, who has always made me so proud, and his lovely wife, nodding at me, who has been such a perfect partner for him. My moment had arrived. I stood up slowly, raising my wine glass. I'd like to say something too, if I may. All eyes turned to me, including my husband's, now wide with terror. Family is indeed everything, I began. And truth is the foundation of family. Without honesty, what do we really have? The table fell silent. My husband reached for my arm under the table. I moved it away. I've recently discovered some truths about my own family that I think everyone here should know. My voice remained steady, almost conversational. For instance, did you know that my husband and Melissa aren't just colleagues? Melissa froze, fork halfway to her mouth. They've been sleeping together for 8 months, I continued calmly. In fact, they spent last weekend at the Lakeside Inn while I was told he was at a marketing conference in Chicago. The collective gasp around the table was audible. Dorothy's hand flew to her pearl necklace. But wait, there's more, I said, reaching into my purse and removing a folder. While discovering my husband's infidelity, I also found some interesting financial discrepancies. I placed the folder on the table and slid it toward Dorothy. It seems your son has been embezzling from his company for over a year. These documents show transfers from corporate accounts to a personal offshore account. I've highlighted the relevant transactions. My husband lunged for the folder, but his brother, always quicker, grabbed it first and opened it, his eyes widening as he scanned the contents. That's not, my husband sputtered. Not what? I asked. Not true? I have copies of everything, including the offshore account details. Melissa, did you know about this? Because the company might find it interesting that an accounting employee was closely involved with someone manipulating the books. Melissa had gone completely pale. I never. Of course, the affair might be considered a personal matter, I continued, if not for the fact that company resources were used to facilitate it. Company cars, expense accounts, conference budgets, all misappropriated to fund romantic getaways. I turned to face Dorothy directly. I particularly thought you should know that the diamond earrings he gave you for Christmas, the ones you're wearing right now, were purchased with stolen company funds. You might want to keep the receipt for when they're confiscated as evidence. Dorothy's hands flew to her ears, horror dawning on her face. My husband stood up, knocking over his chair. Stop this right now, he hissed. You've lost your mind. I smiled serenely. Actually, I've found clarity. And evidence. Lots of evidence, which I've already forwarded to the company's ethics committee, the board of directors, and the SEC. They should be contacting you both on Monday. The backyard had fallen completely silent except for the distant sizzle of forgotten meat on the grill. Every face was turned toward our little drama. Mouths open, eyes wide, drinks forgotten. I've also taken the liberty of meeting with a divorce attorney, I added, turning back to the stunned table. Apparently, infidelity combined with financial crimes nullifies certain aspects of our prenuptial agreement. Fascinating legal territory. I reached for my purse and removed a second envelope, which I handed to my mother-in-law. This contains documents showing that your son has been systematically draining our joint savings account. The money we were saving for your grandchildren's college funds, Dorothy. You've mentioned those future grandchildren so often. I thought you should know they were being robbed before they were even conceived. Dorothy opened the envelope with trembling hands. As she read, her expression transformed from shock to something I'd never seen before. Deep, burning disappointment directed at her son. Is this true? She asked him, voice barely audible. His silence was all the confirmation needed. I picked up my wine glass again, taking a small sip. I want to thank everyone for witnessing this moment. It saves me the trouble of having to explain it multiple times. Then I turned to Melissa, who looked like she might vomit on Dorothy's expensive tablecloth. He told you I didn't know, didn't he? That we were separated or divorcing? That's his pattern. Ask his ex-girlfriend Nicole. You remember her, Dorothy? Still have her photo on your mantle. He told me they had broken up 3 months before he actually ended things with her. Dorothy's hand went to her mouth. And Melissa, I continued gently, almost sympathetically. The gold bracelet he gave you. The one in your Instagram post from February 14th? I admired the same one last year. He told me it was overpriced before buying it for you instead. Classic, isn't it? I placed my napkin on the table and stood up. Dorothy, thank you for including me in your family these past 4 years. Despite everything, I've valued your attempt at welcoming me. The barbecue is lovely. I'm sorry I won't be staying for cake. I walked around the table, stopping behind my husband's chair. He wouldn't look at me. I've already moved my essential belongings out, I told him quietly. I'll have my sister collect the rest next week. The prenup specified infidelity as grounds for forfeiture of asset protection. My lawyer will be in touch. With that, I walked away from the table, through the stunned audience of family members, and toward the front of the house where my pre-ordered rideshare was already waiting. Exactly on schedule. Behind me, I heard Dorothy's voice, shrill with rage. How could you do this? At my birthday party? But she wasn't talking to me. That was 11 months ago. Sometimes I still wake up reaching for him before remembering everything that happened. Old habits die hard, even when they should. The divorce was finalized faster than expected. Turns out, men facing potential criminal charges for financial fraud tend to be surprisingly agreeable during settlement negotiations. The company pressed charges. He pled guilty to lesser charges in exchange for testimony against higher-ups who'd been running a larger scheme. Melissa cooperated with investigators, too, claiming she'd been unaware of the financial crimes. Maybe she was, maybe she wasn't. Either way, she was fired, and last I heard, moved back to her hometown in Ohio. Dorothy sent me a handwritten letter 3 months after the barbecue. 10 pages of elegant stationery filled with her distinctive cursive. Part apology, part explanation, part tentative olive branch. We've met for coffee twice since then. Stilted conversations full of careful phrasing and unspoken regrets. She keeps asking if we might maintain some kind of relationship. I haven't decided yet. His sister, surprisingly, reached out immediately after the barbecue. I always thought he was hiding something, she confessed over wine one evening. He was always Dad's favorite, could do no wrong. It made him entitled. We've become something like friends now. Sometimes healing comes from unexpected directions. The money was mostly recovered, enough for me to put a down payment on a small house in a different neighborhood. Simple, clean, mine. No shared memories, no ghosts in the hallways. I painted every room myself, colors he would have hated. People ask if I regret the public nature of the revelation, if I couldn't have handled it more discreetly. They mistake my planning for cruelty, my precision for vindictiveness. What they don't understand is that secrecy was his weapon. Privacy protected his betrayal. Shadows nurtured his deception. I chose light instead. Some nights, sitting on my new porch swing, I replay the barbecue scene in my mind, not to savor his humiliation, but to remind myself of the moment I reclaimed my dignity. There's a difference. In that moment, watching the carefully constructed facade of his life collapse, I wasn't just exposing his betrayal. I was refusing to become a silent accessory to it. His mother called last week. His sentencing is approaching, and she wanted to know if I'd write a character letter to the judge. I declined politely. Some debts can't be paid with borrowed compassion. Yesterday, I received a job offer in Denver, a significant promotion, a fresh start. I accepted immediately. The mountains have always called to me, though he preferred beaches. Small decisions like these, choices made solely for myself, still feel revolutionary. Do I still love him? That's the question people seem most fascinated by, leaning forward at dinner parties, eyes wide with morbid curiosity. The truth is complicated. I love the man I thought he was. I grieve for the future we'll never have. But I don't regret setting fire to the beautiful, elaborate lie our marriage became. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to tell the truth, however devastating. Secrets fester. Truth, however painful, eventually heals. As for forgiveness, that's a journey still in progress. Not for his sake, but for mine. I'm learning that forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the betrayal never happened. It means refusing to let it define my future. The barbecue revenge wasn't about destroying him. It was about refusing to be destroyed myself, refusing to shrink into the role of deceived wife, refusing to carry the shame that was never mine to bear. In the end, the most perfect revenge wasn't the public exposure or the legal consequences or even the financial settlement. It was the moment I drove away from that house, breathing freely for the first time in months, belonging completely to myself again. Sometimes people ask if I'd do it differently now. I always give the same answer. The only thing I regret is not ordering extra guacamole. It was, after all, my specialty, and I never got to taste it one last time at Dorothy's table. That thought makes me laugh sometimes. How something so trivial can stand out amid life's collapse. But that's recovery for you, finding humor in unexpected places. Last week, I finally packed away our wedding album. Not in anger or sorrow, but with the calm detachment of storing away an old college textbook, something once essential that served its purpose. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Mine wasn't about revenge at all. It was truth, served exactly as it needed to be, unflinching and complete. My therapist says I'm making remarkable progress. I tell her it's because I didn't leave pieces of myself behind when I walked away. I took everything that mattered: my dignity, my future, my ability to trust my own perceptions. This morning I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about him for 3 whole days. Progress isn't linear, but sometimes it arrives in quiet revelations. The mountains outside my new home turn purple at sunset. Nobody here knows my story unless I choose to share it. This anonymity feels like another kind of freedom, the space to define myself beyond what was done to me. Perhaps the truest form of healing isn't forgetting the past, but remembering it without letting it poison your present. I'm not there yet, but for the first time, I can see the path clearly. As for Dorothy's famous family barbecues, I hear they've grown considerably smaller these days. Sometimes justice doesn't need to announce itself. Sometimes it simply arrives, quiet as dawn, changing everything in its light.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.